Thank you for bearing with us through our slight technical delay. I'm joined now by the wonderful Neema, who I've just met. I feel like we're really good buddies now. And we're going to talk a little bit about your work and particularly using games to spread awareness and rather aid the community. So very excited.
Yeah.
I know this is a loaded question, but could you give us an insight about what you do?
Yeah.
What's your day job? Good
question. So I do a number of things. The first thing I do is I run a nonprofit organization called Pollicy, Pollicy. And this organization is headquartered in Kampala, Uganda. But we do work across Africa, and our advocacy is across the world.
Amazing.
So I have about 25 staff across Africa. And the work that we do focuses on feminist digital rights. And so this could be anything from looking at online violence against women, looking at how women use technology, looking at the impact of AI, looking at digital labor. So anything that is related to how technology impacts society and vice versa. And in this company, I do research on these topics. We run programs, for example, skill building. And we also do a lot of government policy and advocacy. So we try to work quite closely with governments. So that's one part of my day. I'm also doing a PhD.
If you weren't busy enough,
yeah.
I mean.
So I'm also doing a PhD where I'm looking at gender and play specifically. Also in Uganda, I'm looking at how girls in the African context are able to play games. It's a very different scenario, you know. I think there is a lot of research on girlhood and girls and gaming, but not much from the African context where games are just being introduced. And so I want to see specifically how can we bring games into schools? Like how can we work with schools, with governments, there's so many gatekeepers. When you think about girls play, like girls are stopped from playing at so many different levels. And so trying to see how do we think about digital play and girls. So that's what my PhD is focusing on. And then in the remaining time that I have,
goodness, what time?
I'm doing a bit of game development and really enjoying it. And so my PhD is also based on the game that I'm making, Kamata there. So we'll talk more about it, but the PhD is looking at how to bring games like that into schools, how to build curricula around video games. But I'm also working on some other 2D games as well. And I want to say, yes, on one hand, game making is a hobby, but it's also a business. So I guess it's like, I really enjoy it as an activity. I love doing art. I find the act of making games to be like playing a game.
Yeah.
I think when I am able to get something to work, because I don't have a tech background, and so it's a lot of fiddling around, and I feel like when I get something to work, it feels like I've solved a puzzle.
Yeah,
so
it must be so satisfying.
For me, game making feels like play as well. Yes. So that's my day.
Oh,
it is a bit overwhelming. It is a little bit stressful.
At some point you sleep, presumably.
Yeah, a full 9 hours. A full 9 hours.
Ooh, that's a good tip, actually.
Yeah.
I've recently started sleeping more. Can recommend.
Yeah, definitely.
Sorry, not strictly relevant to the interview. So I mean, look, that's so many fantastic things. How did you come to do this stuff?
Right.
So there's a lot of different parts that are kind of working really nicely together.
Yeah.
Were you always interested in games? Was that something that you kind of came to a bit later?
So I think especially for where I grew up in the world, I came to games at a very early age. I started playing games from the minute I opened my eyes. I feel I have a brother who's a little bit older than me. And so I remember playing the Atari, I remember playing DOS games, then we got a Nintendo, then a Sega Mega, then, worked up all the way. So I've always had games in my life, but there was a period where, like I like to say that I was an ex-gamer because I had a good 15 years where I didn't play games. And then in my older age, I have gotten back into gaming. But ever since I was a kid, I tried to make games. Like I would try with whatever random technology there was to make games, but there were no tutorials back then. We didn't even have the internet back then. And so I would try to make things and it didn't really work out. But then when I started this nonprofit, I really started to see the impact of interactive media to talk about our issues. Because think about people who have never used a computer in their lives, and then they come on the internet for the first time. How do you explain a lot of these concepts? Or how do you, even if you think about your parents, like some of you may have very technologically advanced parents, but think about how do you explain scams to your parents? How do you explain digital safety? Like all these complex topics, and they're so boring. Like to go and talk to someone, okay, this is how you get scammed. It's boring, right? Like people are not going to pay attention, and already people have attention problems. And so it's thinking about how do we make interactive media? How do we make games? Because one thing about teaching older people is that it's easy for them to get offended when you're trying to teach topics. And so I'm really trying to see what are other ways we can teach really important things, but in different media, and where we can keep people's attention, but also ensure that they actually learn the main message.
Yeah.
So I'm really interested in using games for some of these purposes, where it's not just aiming at children, for example, but I think an audience that game developers often miss is older people, people 50 and above. They have a lot of free time, they have a lot of money, and there's so many topics that are not covered for them. And I think that that is a very interesting audience to target, especially if we're thinking even of like, yeah, obviously entertainment, but also serious games. So all this to come back to say that I understand that the topic I work on, digital rights, is a complicated topic. And I'm always on the lookout for how can I make this information easy to understand and distill for different audiences. And one of the ones I've landed on is play. For example, we came up with a game called Where's My Data? Because we're trying to teach people, where is your data? I mean, living in Australia, that is a constant question I have. Like when we just had to park and we had to download an app, I was like, where are you taking my data? Like you're asking me for very personal information just to park my car. Where's my data going? Are you using third parties? So kind of even open, so we have a card game where we talk about these issues, and even like getting into card games, I think it's tricky to be entertaining and educational. But just to give you an example, like these are the kinds of topics we're trying to bring into a more fun, playful arena that makes you still think critically about really important issues.
That's it, and making sure that's accessible to people.
Yes.
You're right, it is such important information.
Yeah.
So they need it.
Yeah.
And to get them to pay attention,
Yeah.
being kind of playful about
Yes.
it is so helpful.
Yes.
In so many ways.
And going back to that example, like I want it to be something like a small card game you can take to your parents, and over like a few evenings, you can have that, you can make the space for that conversation without them feeling like they're being attacked or that they don't have the knowledge. So it can be done in that playful context.
Yeah, absolutely. And the kind of a way that's more subtle. So there's nothing
Yes.
worse than being like, hey, sit down, I'm going to teach you something.
Yeah, exactly.
So actually, you know, we can absorb it.
Yeah, definitely.
Awesome. I mean, you're currently working on a game as well, Kamata.
Yes.
Could you tell us about that?
Yeah, definitely. So ever since I was a kid, so I grew up in Nigeria, just for context. You know, I'm half Tanzanian, I'm half Indian. And all across my life, you know, I have seen pollution and like really, really devastating pollution, plastic pollution. You know, I can remember as a kid when I was 10, we had to do like an art competition and draw a perfect world and pollution and all these things. And I don't feel there's enough action. Like every time I go out and I see how much plastic is being used every day, it's a huge problem that I don't feel has enough attention. And especially in Uganda, one of the issues I've seen is that people don't respect their land in the same way, because it's a very migratory country. Like people have moved quite a bit, and so people might say, yeah, I live in the capital, but it's not where I'm from. So they might not have as much respect for the land. I'm giving that excuse. But there's a lot of littering. Just to say, there is a lot of littering. Like people are always throwing plastic bottles, plastic bags. It chokes the city is sort of built on a swamp, so it chokes all the waterways. There's all these floods. And I really wanted to make a game about valuing your environment and valuing the community, which is not a new concept, of course, in Australia. But I figured that, yeah, maybe children are the pathway for this. Yeah. And so combining all these things together, like making a game, taking it into schools, working with children, but also making it fun. So like trying to hide the educational aspect of it. It'll be like, you're learning, but it's not too obvious. And I'm trying to hit that sweet spot when it comes to design. And I'm also quite new to this space as well. So I'm not saying I have all the ideas, but it's like, how do we teach things in a fun way that people can grasp the concepts? Because I know, especially in Australia, if you mention educate, like for example, if you apply for Screen Australia or any of these things, they do not want the word education anywhere in there, like not allowed. Which is very confusing. Every game teaches you something, right? Every game has a story. And so for them to make that such an issue, no, nothing must be learned through your games. I find that very strange. And so even if I talk about the educational aspects of my game, it becomes a bit problematic. So it's like finding the sweet spot between entertainment and education.
Absolutely. I guess that's another case of for the players not being like, hey, you have to learn these things.
Yes, there's no quiz, there's nothing like that. Yeah.
It's just, you're enjoying and you're walking away with that understanding.
Yeah, exactly.
So you said you're new to the actual development space. Could you talk to us a little bit about how you kind of got into that space, what your journey into kind of more game development has been like?
Definitely. So I first started, I want to talk just about a few other games that I've made that are very simple. So the first one, I got a grant from the Mozilla Foundation. The game was about AI-powered disinformation. And the reason I bring it up is that I really want young people to think outside the box. Like who your funders could be, like where you draw funding from can be very, very different. So I got this grant from Mozilla Foundation. They have a creative grant that anyone globally can apply. And for that one, I built the game in Twine. And I think Twine is very easy to use. It was okay. Like in terms of like play as a practice, I didn't enjoy the platform as much. I found it very limiting in what it could do. But the game was well received. It's been used in classrooms and universities, which I think is really cool. Because there's a little feedback form, and like every now and then I'll get like 30 surveys back. So I'm like, oh, this must have been a classroom.
That's been put up on a
exactly, somewhere. Which is really cool. Like the people who have come up and said where they've used it is just so interesting. So that was one. And then the next one, I got a grant from the International Cooperation Organization from the Netherlands. So their government funder funded the next game, which was about digital safety. So because one thing is that like as I was growing up, I didn't see people who looked like me reflected in games. And I think that that's really important. And it's improved for sure, but I still think there's so many stories that have not been told. So in this game, I focused on characters from different African countries, specifically women, to talk about digital safety. And that game was made in a program called Tuesday.JS, using JavaScript a bit. And but it was still very drag and drop. And that was pretty fun because you could like change the backgrounds, and it's also a narrative game. So I went from those kind of platforms to Unity, which was such a big jump. Like I've never felt so dumb before. Like and like I went straight into 3D. It was just such a big jump. Like, and Unity is, for me, the way I learn is I just go in and I start clicking like crazy, like your automation program, until something works. But Unity is not that kind of program. No, it's not. You really have to know what you're doing. And so I've just been teaching myself how to use Unity. And as I said, it's been a really fun experience. And so that's sort of what I've built Kamata with. But also I don't want to say like I can code and I made the game in code. I'm using something called Game Creator, which lets you do a lot more drag and dropping. To build a game. And I also say this because while I understand this is about like gaming students, I think I want more women to make games, to hear more stories. Absolutely. And I feel like it can be daunting to say, how do you get into making a game if you've never made a game? But I want people to know that you can do it. Like there is a pathway and you can definitely do it.
Because I'm often asked, as a historian who studies games, like, do you also make them? And I'm always like, that's too. Right. But it sounds like.
But there is a pathway, Like I feel like you can build up to a certain level. Yeah.
All right, we'll meet again in a year.
Yes.
I'll tell you what I've.
Right. I want to see your game. Yeah.
Can we look back quickly just to the grant aspect, and the funding aspect?
Yes.
I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about that. We've got a few people, I think, on the live stream and in the room who are in that process of seeking funding. So how did you find those particular grants? They're kind of, I guess, not the classic game grants, for sure.
Yes. Yeah, and I hope that whoever's here can take away from this conversation that there are many global opportunities, and that don't feel stuck in Australia. Like, don't feel stuck that you are limited to the funding opportunities within the Australian border, because as much money as Australia as a country has, I feel like in gaming, the opportunities don't feel as vast. I feel a lot of funders, a lot of publishers are from other countries, I think, as we would know. But in terms of like where you can get the funding, where you can pitch your ideas, there are so many opportunities where you just have to convince someone. Like, just to give you an example, I had this crazy idea for a mockumentary in Uganda where my friend and I were just like, what if we just made a funny mockumentary about digital rights in Kampala? And it was so silly, but we pitched it to a university in California and they loved it.
Oh, wow.
And they funded it. They gave us $30,000, which is 50,000 Australian, to make, a few, like maybe a 30-minute mockumentary, for example. So it's,
Fantastic.
And the other thing is, I think Australians have such interesting ideas that, don't feel shy. I mean, at most, you've wasted a few hours and you get a no, at most, right? It can feel very depressing when you keep getting rejections, but I think good ideas, like people are looking for good ideas, for sure. And yeah, I wish there was a way to make Australians see, like, there are so many opportunities in other countries, like across Africa, like where the skill, like the kind of games the students have made here, like those skills in other contexts are, amazing. Like people would love to see things like that. And if there's just some way that we can get out and look at those other opportunities.
And I guess it's a matter of being able to put yourself out there.
Yeah.
I mean, you're right, the worst thing someone can say is
Yeah.
no.
Yeah.
And the best thing they can say is, yes, please,
Yeah,
do
exactly.
this, here's some money.
Yeah,
Which
yeah.
is pretty good.
Yeah.
Definitely that resonates. Sorry, not to make this interview about me. I got a grant with the University of Toronto to look at video games. That was for a museum grant.
Oh, I love
Like,
those.
so it was
Yeah,
a real
so cool.
kind of like, I
Yeah.
was like, sure, like I'll do.
Yeah.
I didn't thought they'd say no.
Yeah, I think museums are such the museums and games, I think, is
yeah,
a
there's
very
such a
beautiful
link there.
relationship. Yeah.
Absolutely. Shout out to Acme, my favorite Australian
Yes.
museum.
Kamata is at Acme. Anyone going to Melbourne, you can play it there.
So I'm going in October. It's now on my
Ooh,
list.
nice. Are we doing on time? Okay.
Okay. This is a pretty large question, but if you came across your younger self, what advice would you give them about kind of where you are now, kind of how you got here? What
Yeah.
would be your advice?
What would be my advice? I think the advice that I would have for myself and other people is to always be creating. And I think I want to build on what you said in terms of having a portfolio, like having something to show. Like, just to give you an example, like right now my company is hiring for a creative fellow. And we received way more applications than we thought we would. Like we're recruiting for 3 fellows. We've got like 2,000 applications, which feels insane because then we were like, how are we going to?
Oh, you get down to only 3.
But then the easy thing is, like, we've asked for a portfolio and people have not provided one.
Okay.
And it's like, if you don't have a portfolio, I'm sorry, I'm just going to have to throw your application out,
Yeah.
right? Because it was a requirement, and if you have nothing to show, what do I know of you compared to these other 2,000 people?
Well, that's the thing. Yeah, if you know,
Yeah.
if you're one of 2,000,
Yeah,
you need to stand
you need
out
to show
whatever you can.
something to stand
Absolutely.
out, and I don't even care like about. Obviously, I do care about quality, but it's just show me something that you've put in an effort to do something. And I think for my younger self, I would say is like to just keep creating more.
Yeah.
Like for example, I got into illustrating in my late 20s. But I've always liked drawing. I've always liked art, but I never put anything out there. And I know it does feel weird to put your work out there. I feel like it takes it to another dimension where it's not your private
Yeah, you
art.
kind of
It's
have to be vulnerable.
yeah, but I wish I did it earlier. I wish I started putting my work out there. Like honestly, like I started illustrating, it just for fun, totally for fun. And within 2 months, a band contacted me and was like, "Can you do our album cover?"
It's so cool.
And
Every
I
new
just-
thing you say you've done, I'm like, that's so cool.
and I didn't even think about it, and I had never thought about pricing. And at the time, I was like, "Okay, you can give me like 25 pounds, whatever." And then they wrote back to me, and they're like, "We can't pay you that little. Like that's not going to be okay." I was like, "Oh, okay."
Yeah, that's also
Oh,
very
my work
kind.
is worth more. So, but yeah, I could have started way earlier because I love doing art.
Yeah.
And I should have just done it earlier. So just all this to say, put your work out there. It does feel vulnerable, but it opens so many cool doors for you.
Awesome. Are there any final thoughts you'd like to leave us with?
I think my final thoughts are just to make things. I love making things. I love putting it out there. I love getting feedback. And the other thing is, I learned so much from your presentation about QA. And that made me learn that I need QA people. And then you mentioned about volunteering QA. So if there's anyone here who wants to volunteer to do QA, I have 3 games in the pipeline that all need lots of QA. So if you are looking, I can't pay at the moment, but if you're looking for such opportunities, then hey, I'm glad to know this is on the table.
Amazing.
Yeah.
This is why we come to network.
Yeah. Yeah. I have some stuff coming out, and I would love people to like contribute in any way. Yes.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me, and thank you all for being here.
We're going to do some fun technical things while our next
Yeah.
speaker gets mic'd up.
Mostly just taking this off.
Like, I'm like, I do.